Hello and welcome. This is Jen Riddell with the California Naturalist Program. Today we are recording a conversation with two guests from the local community about Native California history, Native California land use, and about traditional ecological knowledge. We are speaking with Sherrie Smith-Ferri, Ph.D. She's an enrolled member of the Dry Creek Rancheria band of Pomo Indians, and she is of Bodega Bay Miwok ancestry. We're also talking with Marrufo. She is an Eastern Pomo from Robinson Rancheria band of Pomo Indians, and also the director of the EPA for the Guidaville band. So we are going to have a casual conversation with these two, and hopefully really get to enjoy learning about what's happening locally. First, Sherrie and Meyo are going to introduce themselves for a few minutes, and then we're going to launch into a few questions. So who would like to start?
Go ahead, Meyo.
I was going to tell you to start first.
Okay. All right.
I can start just a little bit about myself. Once again, I'm Meyo Marrufo. I am the environmental director for Guidaville Rancheria. I run the tribal environmental programs for the air, land, and water. I am also the Central California representative for the Regional Tribal Operations Committee for Region 9 US EPA. And I am the California State Representative for US EPA Tribal Caucus. So that's environmental and work, and I'm also a native. I am Eastern Pomo from the Clear Lake Basin, Robinson Rancheria. I work in Mendocino County for a Pomo tribe in Mendocino County. There are 26 Pomo tribes, and so I'm from one and work for one and married to one. So I have three in my life here, valley, coast, and lake.
And I can also mention that Meyo is an artist and makes great regalia too. So you have another career as well. And I'm Sherrie Smith-Ferri, and I grew up in Sonoma County, which is where my native ancestry is from. So on my dad's side of the family, so I belong to the Dry Creek Rancheria band of Pomo Indians, which is located around the town of Healdsburg today. And I grew up in Dry Creek Valley, right outside of Healdsburg. And the other side of my dad's ancestry is over on the coast. So Sonoma Coast, Coast Miwok near Bodega Bay. And I went away to get my degree in sociocultural anthropology, mainly so I could work on helping to rewrite some of what I know was erroneous history, and have worked a great deal in museums throughout my career. And am recently retired and enjoying basically working probably just as much as I used to, but now I'm getting to choose my projects more. So having fun coming back to focus more on things close to home for me.
Thank you both. So one of the reasons we wanted to have you guys present for us is that both of you are really involved in maintaining and enhancing our knowledge of local traditional practices. So I wanted to ask you guys if there was a traditional aspect to how you guys were raised, and do you and your family still practice traditional harvesting of any plants or animals around here?
I'll start with that one, since I made Meyo start last time. I had the really good fortune of being able to be raised quite literally in our homeland. And spent and with my dad's family, so kind of all generations. And so I had the experience, you know, less so than earlier days, but definitely had the experience of spending a lot of time, you know, outside with the family, doing all kinds of things. Love to get together. A lot of it centered around eating. A lot of it centered around native foods. So we go over to the coast and gather seaweed, actually spend usually a few days camped out. This is in the days we could camp out on the coast. We could camp out. The guys were getting abalone. You know, we were usually picking seaweed and drying it and running around and playing together. You know, all my cousins and I have wonderful memories of those times. But certainly looking back on it, learned lots and lots about seafoods, you know, all different kinds of seafoods, how you dried them, how you gathered them, how you stayed safe at the coast. Just lots of it never seemed like we were really, as I said, learning anything, but we were learning a lot. And that's really one of the best ways to learn. And we were certainly enjoying being able to spend time in the natural world. So I'll stop there. So yeah, no, we actually, and the other part of your question is, what do we gather today? We go and get seaweed and go to the coast. Gather a lot of plant foods and really part of the reason for doing that is just, again, to get together with family and friends and engage in something, in beautiful place, something that's really a fun activity that you can enjoy the rest of the year remembering when you eat the salt that you gathered, or you're, you know, sort of drinking manzanita cider from berries you gathered, all of that kind of thing. And I'll stop. Go ahead, Mia.
So I actually grew up in Sacramento. I spent about 15 years in Humboldt County, and then went to Sacramento for a lot of years. And so I actually hung around with the Miwoks and the Maidus over there. They kind of took this Pomo girl in and showed me kind of what they did. So I grew up as a teenager learning food from the ground up, learning regalia process from the ground up, and learning from not only Pomos but non-Pomos majority. And so I learned kind of some of the foods that are over there in Miwok country. You come to Pomo country and there is a lot of seaweed, you know, Coast Miwok and Coast Pomo, there's a lot of seaweed, there's a lot of ocean gathering. You grow up over in Miwok country and you eat miner's lettuce and deer meat because that's what they have more of. So when I came home, moved home I'd say about almost 20 years ago, I moved home and started working for my tribe. I started learning what local foods around here that I could gather. And so started learning about the different types of acorns, specifically the ones that we gather over here, which are blue oak acorns. Learning about some of the different plants that they didn't have over in Miwok country. It was actually, when I moved over here, it just was really kind of an enlightening thing because I wasn't raised in it, you know, as far as the food culture of Pomo country. And so I got to seek out and learn from who I wanted to. And so it became that much more important to me because I had to find the people to teach me. And so now I still gather and I still eat the food and talk to some of the youth people now about learning the food processes and kind of enjoying it more. I think learning it as a young person and an adult, I have a lot more respect for it. Not more respect than those who have grown up with it, but more respect of having to find it. and having to learn about it and seek people to find it.
So one of the things that I've heard Pomos talk about with lots of opinions is acorns. I've heard some people say that black oaks are the best and the tastiest. I've heard people say that tan oaks are the best and the tastiest. And you just said that blue oaks are the primary acorns that you learned to process. Can you guys give your opinions about which acorns?
Here we go.
I'll start on it. I think one of the things you're seeing is, all Pomo peoples are not the same, and we all live in very kind of different environmental sort of areas. So basically where I grew up, we didn't have blue oak for the most part. What we used was tan oak and black oak. And that's what I grew up knowing is the best. And I think what you grow up being used to is what you like. It seems right to you. So it's, there's not, people eat all kinds of acorns all over the state. I think it just has a lot to do with what's in your home community and how people have learned to kind of use it, make it.
So blue oaks are the best. No,
No.
Well, I've heard people say, like, leave the white oaks for the deer. And then I've heard other people say that the valley oaks are the best, but they might be coming from the Central Valley. So, sorry, go ahead, Neil.
For us, the Central Valley white oaks are not, you can't find them over here because they're such a big tree that were taken early on to build. So what may have been large trees that were used, because there is some historical things about certain trees, but a lot of oaks were taken, the larger ones, because they're nice tree building oaks. Blue oaks are more here in the Lake County area, and so they're more prolific, and you can't, black oaks you have to go up higher for them here in Lake County. Tan oaks, there's tribes that will only eat tan oaks because that's what's more, tan oak is the most prolific. Black oak has the most oil and the most highest protein, but blue oaks have a nuttier flavor, I think. So, and then there's emery oaks, which are sweeter.
Mm-hmm.
And white oaks take a little bit more processing. To me, they're a little more bland. So it all depends on what you grew up with. I like mine kind of bitter, kind of chunky. Whereas other people like Miwoks, if it's not perfectly smooth and gelatinous, they won't eat it. So it depends on where you grew up.
Yeah, a lot of people talk about Indians ate acorn mush. Well, that varies all across the state. Some people like it really, really thin. Some people like it much thicker and more solid, almost like polenta in some cases. The texture of it really varies. You start feeling like Goldilocks. What you grow up with is usually the one that's just right. And when you go somewhere else, you're just like, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good, but
right.
Yeah. And
not your comfort food.
It's when you read the older accounts, you get the sense too that it was, just like everything else, acorns tend to cycle, and there's boom years and bust years, and that there's a lot of different acorns that everybody knew you could use, a lot of different kinds of oaks and acorns, and it was good to have other kinds of foods that you could fall back on. If you couldn't get the kind that you preferred, there's still lots and lots and lots of other choices. So that's always a good thing.
So both of you kind of touched on a couple of issues related to traditional ecological knowledge. And I wanted to ask you guys how you would define traditional ecological knowledge. And then we can talk a little bit more about what you do with it.
That's your bailiwick, Meyo.
traditional ecological knowledge to me is the ancestral knowledge that our people have practiced over time. I don't know, it's just a fancy word of saying our native knowledge. It's just a fancy word. It's a new word, a fancy nice word to validify and quantify the Indians' knowledge of this earth. Quite honestly, to me, it's a new word. It's a new word, but it's not a new theory. It just has been given a fancy word to say traditional ecological knowledge because nobody wants to say culture.
And I'm going to jump in here. You know, I would say California Indian people in general, I mean, we used to get called diggers. We used to get called all sorts of terms by, you know, early non-native people coming into the area that saw us, you know, kind of digging in the earth to get food. Our kind of way of making a living was not valued. It was seen as kind of very animalistic, living off kind of what the land gives you. And more importantly, there was this component that really wasn't recognized of being able to manage the land around you. So what a lot of people didn't realize, non-native people coming into the area looked around and really saw paradise, and they didn't realize that it was a garden. You know, this paradise was here because native people were managing the landscape around them to produce that abundance and diversity that they were seeing in native animals and plants. It's really quite sophisticated, and it was totally missed by, you know, the depth of knowledge that required, the complexity that required, just was totally missed by non-native observers who just saw native people as kind of like another animal living off the landscape. So I think one of the reasons traditional ecological knowledge sounds much more impressive than, you know, I think it's a way of also some sort of nod to recognition of just how complicated what was going on is. You know, it's like having degrees in botany and you know, knowing your insects, knowing your animals, knowing your water systems, knowing your you know, all the things about soil conditions. You know, you have to understand animal behavior, fish behavior, you have to know all of that to make this work successfully. So it's really deceptively simple on the surface. So hopefully traditional ecological knowledge gets at some of that complexity. And
I think part of it is that they use the word holistic so much in the 70s and early 80s, the holistic approach, that when they came to, and then climate change happened, and they had to figure out how to use this traditional ecological knowledge, the Native American knowledge, they couldn't use the word holistic because it was already taken, and they had to figure out a way to encompass it.
Do you guys consider yourselves practitioners of, you know, you're making me rethink how you'd want to say this phrase, but holistic or cultural ecological knowledge? And if you are, how would you say that you are a practitioner? I mean, I know that there's a lot of basket weaving around here where people do a lot of cultivation of sedge bed, which means you're maintaining riparian zones and riparian vegetation. There's a lot of other practices around here that people are doing that maintain some ecological integrity in the areas where they work. So are you involved in any of those things? And how would you describe that work?
We look at each other going, who wants to take this one on? Are you a traditional practitioner?
I would say that, you know, there's no going backwards. So, you know, we're never gonna, the world has changed, the natural world has changed so much since, you know, kind of, if you wanted to say traditional ecological knowledge, I mean, like, what is you start, I would start out with the question, what is traditional? And there's lots of answers to that question, but it kind of assumes, probably most people think of traditional as being before pre-contact times, pre-contact with non-native people. And and you know, that is never going to be possible. That world is gone. So I think, and what you have today is trying to, I mean, I'm going to go back here a little bit. I guess I would say that I think a lot of what Native people would tell you, traditional ecological knowledge might be talked about it another way, is taking care of your home, and seeing yourself as part of being be part of a specific place, your home, which is, you know, kind of all the beings around you, the land around you, kind of knowing that and helping to try and take care of that, and then depending on it to take care of you. And I might stop there, but I think that's some of the basis of it, and that's different today, I would say, than earlier.
Well, Sherrie, I could interject a little bit that you started an amazing native garden at the Grace Hudson Museum. I think, and some of your intent there was to highlight some traditionally used plants and that are still being used.
Absolutely, but I think even, and I should say that Meyo was part of that whole process as well, and helping to plan and use it. But I think, at least from my perspective, part of what I was trying to do with that is to help people understand a place, so this place, the Ukiah Valley area, and to learn about it, to understand it and build a relationship with it. To understand, you know, this is a community, who else are members of this community? How do we relate to them? What are they like? So there's something deeper than just learning facts. I guess that's it. So, you know, there's the facts about this is X plant, and, you know, this is blue, you know, well, black oak, let's say. So this is a black oak, here it is. I can tell you, you know, all these facts about it. Facts about the acorns, I can show you how you process it, but underlying all of that, process that into food, but sort of underlying all of that, there's something more that should be relational and sort of engage your emotions and your feelings, and your actions toward that. So it shouldn't just be about isolated facts. It should be about something more, some sort of view of the world around you and your place in that world. And I would say it should also be some sort of view of the world as the natural world as, again, both sort of being able to be benefited by human action, and that humans have a role to play that can be helpful, and that the world around us is what ultimately we depend on for our lives. Because if we don't develop better relationships, we're all going to die. You know? So
break it down.
I have.
Go ahead.
Oh no, I was going to say I have more questions. If you wanted to, I don't know if you want to answer that specific question, or you can weave in your answers to the next question.
Go for it.
Okay. Well, this is really about resilience. And so, Sherrie, you alluded to this, but the history of Mendocino County is pretty brutal, as well as Sonoma County, in terms of how the white settlers dealt with the native populations. And it was really catastrophic for families and for tribes. How do you see your families and your tribes as being resilient and responding to living in a modern world and surviving and thriving as tribal people or as native people?
We're still here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we're still here. There's I guess in terms of that, we're not just talking about two counties. We're actually talking about the whole of the United States, you know. But we're also talking about other countries too. I think as far as me, I'm still here. I am. We talked about whether or not we feel that we are cultural practitioners. I believe I'm a cultural practitioner. I am an emerging elder. I am becoming an elder slowly but surely, and hope that I am able to give information now that doesn't set somebody into the wrong direction. I think that's part of what being a practitioner is. A practitioner is somebody who uses it and learns from it and continues to grow with it. A technician is somebody who learns from a book and just goes out there and does it willy-nilly. You know, a practitioner is somebody who actually learns from it and it becomes part of their life. I think as far as being here today, certainly my grandmother was a boarding school baby. She was taken away at the age of 7 or 6 and not given back until she was 15. And so I see a lot of the ramifications of boarding school on my family, but we are still here. My family has a mix of Filipino in it because of when the Filipinos came to Lake County to work the fields. My grandmother and grandfather got together. My grandmother being a Native woman, my grandfather being a Filipino. And yet we're still here. I'm learning about my culture, doing my culture. I sing, I dance, I, practice the food ways, I practice our spiritual ways. And I think if that doesn't show resilience, I am resilience. Because I am.
Yeah, that's exactly what I would say. We're here. And we're, there's a lot of revitalization that's going on with Native California, and there's a lot of real transformation that's going on. As tribes in California are getting more economic means, there's just some amazing and really inspirational projects they're taking on and work that they're doing. And I am so glad I've lived to be able to see some of that change. And I can see one of the things that's a gift of getting older is seeing how generations have kind of in their own times and circumstances, honored their legacy and really worked at surviving, and then at taking some of those basic kind of bedrock cultural values and kind of building lives around them. So I think it hasn't been easy for California Indian peoples, but we're here.
So how would you guys or what would you want young people entering the field of conservation to know about traditional practices or traditional ecological knowledge, cultural knowledge, when they're entering this field of conservation? What would you want them to bring to their careers?
I can start it if you want. My first, oh, beautiful people of the California conservation. Just because you know something doesn't mean it's meant to be done. Just because you know about one particular aspects of Native America does not mean that you know everything. Not every Indian was a basket weaver. Not every Indian was, you know, this great spiritual leader. But I do think that as you endeavor into conservation and you begin to see some of the practices that Native Americans did, you know, take that knowledge, grow it. You know, as you learn fire management from different people, understand it for what it is, that this is practices that have been happening for thousands and thousands of years and ceased happening when we were colonized. And now the benefits of how we managed our land are important again. So as you learn these different practices, as you learn about the different people, understand the differences, and don't be afraid to ask questions. You know, I think as we move into different realms now of conservation, because it is growing, it is changing. There's a much younger group that is coming up, and I say younger because I'm 50. You know, there's a younger group growing, and their ideas are very different. And as they come up, the first thing is, you don't know everything, ask the questions. You know, those people that you may think were old school, well, guess what? That's what traditional ecological knowledge is. It is old school. It is learning about the past and incorporating it into our future so that we may have a future.
I guess I would say that I would encourage everybody to really learn the land around them. You know, see it as a whole landscape. You know, get to know the neighbors in that landscape, and see what it can teach you, and just spend a lot of time looking at things, observing things. Don't go into it necessarily thinking that you have all the answers, but just be open to kind of watching and listening, and it's actually a very good way to learn. So, and try things. You know, there's nothing like hands-on learning to really trying and failing to really start to learn something yourself.
So I feel like both of you have such a deep breadth of, or depth and breadth of knowledge and backgrounds that we've barely scratched the surface. But we're at about 35 minutes right now. Do you guys want to, do you have any last thoughts that you'd like to give our CCC class? Is there anything that you don't want to walk away without having said?
I think I would reiterate what Sherrie said, and it's ask the questions. ask questions. There are, in Mendocino County, 13 Pomo tribes. And you're coming into Mendocino County, you're coming into, well, this is Pomo country. You're coming into an area that has 13 Pomo tribes, but 13 individual different tribal entities. It's not just the same, all encompassing one thing. They all may be Pomo, but they're not all alike. We share very similar things, but at the same time, we're all very different. Understand that this area, what works for fire management up in Hoopa and Miwok up in Humboldt County does not work here. We are a different people. This is in a different landscape. So learn about the landscape that you have here in Mendocino County first. Understand it a little bit better.
I guess I would say too, know that the land here has been people's homes, our people's homes for, 12,000 years or more. And it's been a landscape where people have been able to survive and sustain themselves and to live, a really very kind of rich and settled life by learning how to live within limits. And the limits of what the land could provide, and in a kind of partnership with humans. And this landscape was really meant to have human people on it. And it has been so fundamentally changed. I think one of the things that is, unless you've sort of been here, grown up here, and then heard stories from your family members that were older about what the land was and the place was like, when they were growing up here, I think the scale of change that's happened is hard to understand. And a lot of that is an absence. It's the absence of so many kinds of beings, plants, animals, birds, insects. There's as humans have increased, we've increasingly sort of lost all these other parts of the community here, and there's a sadness to it all too. When you look around, there's joy and sadness, but I think really love to see some restoration happen. So encouraged when I hear about some of the restoration projects that are going on, and a lot of those I think the CCC has helped be involved with, and it's such important work. And I think the earth is so resilient. I've been just amazed at some of the things that, on a very small scale, that I've had a role. It's just, if you give the land a chance, things come back. Don't be discouraged. I think we all have to keep trying.
All right. Well, I think we're at our time. I want to thank you guys both very much for being here. I would love to keep going for a couple of hours, but I imagine everybody wants to have dinner and get some water, etc. So thank you both very, very much for your time. And I hope that we get to talk with you in person in the future and hang out and maybe do some of that food and do some more learning.
Is there anything else you want to throw out there, Jen, before we go?
What do you mean?
Oh, I don't know. Just
I feel like you both touched on some really interesting concepts, thinking about really asking questions and really learning more than just what's on the surface, and thinking about how people learn things in the past. It wasn't a quick thing. People learned from their families, they learned from doing, they learned from practicing. And that's something that we miss in our education system now. And I think that's, why it would be really wonderful to have a whole week with you guys to talk about these things. But yeah, I don't know what else I'd add. There's a lot more to learn about how we live in the land and how we live with the people around us, including the plants and animals. And hopefully this is a start for everybody.